Your love is the best part, love is the best part. Your love is the best part, love is the best part. Even if it all falls apart, your love is the best part, love is the best part.
There was so much that was said in 6 hours. It was crazy town. It was insane. But one of the things I remember is in the middle of Nikki talking, and I'm looking at Chris, and this conversation is happening, and I realize, because Chris said it. He said, you're just lucky that there was no affair. There was nothing extramarital. He said, because that would be a completely different conversation. This would be a completely different story as of right now. But then in the midst of that, it felt like the presence, it makes me sound way more spiritual than I really am. I'm just telling you what I experienced. But it was very much like this encounter where I remember writing about it and telling Nikki that it was like, I sat there and said, God, I just want to say thank you. I have to say thank you so much that this is happening right now. The whole thing, not just the not affair, that there was no affair, there was no anything else, there's no tons of pornography, there's no this or that. It was just relational mess that was just real. I just remember being so grateful that this conversation was happening, because I knew in that moment that this was an opportunity to change something that I couldn't change any other way. Chris said 2 major things that really stuck with me the whole time. First is he looked at me, he said, you wanna know what your problem is? And I was like, what? And he goes, you are ridiculously selfish. And only a dad can say something that direct and could be potentially hurtful, and yet it come across with so much love that you're like, oh my God, you're so right. I didn't even recognize that was being selfish, because I thought I was including everyone. How can I include everyone and it's selfish? And it was like, in that moment, it was like, oh my God, pretty much everything I'm doing is selfish. And the other thing he said was, and I don't know if he said it there in the hallway later, because I ran into him again, but he said, where you are currently, you can't fix your marriage, but you can fix you. And if you fix you, you can become lovable again. And then maybe Nikki will fall in love with you. The same man she fell in love with 7 years ago, she'll fall in love with again. And then you can work on your marriage. And it was like, I had never heard that before. Every marriage book I've ever read is how to fix your marriage, and 5 steps to a great marriage, and 15 marriage starters, conversation, and your devotional marriage Bible starter kit study, and instead it was like, he gave such clarity to the fact that no, your marriage actually begins with 2 people, and one of those people, you, is seriously jacked up. And forget how you got there. The fact is, are you gonna fix it? Go get counseling and fix you. Get a real counselor who's real good and fix you.
And I told Jake, you know what? Really, you can go out and have affairs. I'm serious. I'm 100% serious. Go sleep with any woman you want. I'm that done. There's nothing you could do to hurt me. Really, go try. Go ahead. It won't hurt me, because I'm that completely done. There's nothing left inside of me. I have drained out every bit of hurt inside of me. I'm done. And I really was, I was surprisingly done. I'm not gonna leave. I'm not gonna take your kids from you. I'm not gonna be mean. I'll be a very nice, courteous wife, and I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'm dead inside when it comes to me and you. There's nothing you can do. Nothing. We're completely over.
Yeah, it was terrible.
And
it was the most terrible moment of my entire life. 100%. Because I'm sorry, but it was because for me, it was men are naturally fixers. Like, you want to fix stuff. You want to do, what do I do? And when there was like, that was it. It was done. There wasn't like a do. There wasn't a fix. There wasn't a step one. It was like the Lord literally going like this could take the rest of my life to repair. And was I even willing to like, if it could be repaired, it would take like, because I didn't even know if that was possible. But if I could, it would take the rest of my life. And honestly, that's what I deserved, because I had hurt her heart that much. There's a hopelessness that's like so ridiculously overwhelming of like, no, I did that. Like, she's not wrong. I did that. You can argue and try to justify, well, I did it because of this, and well, my brokenness here, well, it's just real. That was it. So I was sitting in the hallway going like, oh my God, like what do you do? That was really the question. I don't know how other way to put it. Like, what do you do? Like, oh, because on the other end, I'm going like, what? Okay, we're still in Chicago. We're not even at home. We're not like, it's not like, okay, well, we're at home. Like, you go to your bedroom and I'll kind of like mosey around the house or something, or like try to whatever. We're in Chicago in like one of the largest, most important conferences in like, that's happened in a long time. Like, this is a significant moment, like in everyone's life. But it was like this, it was a weird swirl of like craziness. And we're like, she gets up, or I was sitting in the hall, and Chris Valentin, I'm on my phone because I was like, I was trying to figure out what I needed to counsel or what I needed to do, like in terms of schedule, because I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. This is just insane, you know? You don't just pick up and like, oh, well, I have a trip in the next few days, so I'm out, you know? And Chris Valentin, you know, of course, comes back into the hall as the Lord would have it. And he goes, I sure hope you're not planning on going home. And I was like, no, I'm not planning on going home. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do next. And he said, go get counseling. Find a good counselor and get counseling. You need help. Thank you so much. And he said, there's two things that would be immaturity right now. Give up your calling or give up your marriage. Either one is complete immaturity. He said, it's immaturity because God has obviously called you. You're obviously anointed. You're obviously gifted. So to give that up would be immaturity. To give up your marriage, that would be immaturity too, because you just be walking away from a woman who obviously loves you. She wouldn't be as frustrated as she is today if she didn't love you. So she's obviously frustrated because she loves you, and you just are doing a very terrible job. And so don't give up your marriage and don't give up your calling. Figure out how to tell your wife that she has your heart and fulfill what God's called you to do. And you have to figure out how to do both. And I was like, okay. But I had one step, which is go get counseling. And so we come home in awkward fashion. The first night we're home, and I'm sitting down in our house down here somewhere, and the Lord said, I'm like praying, obviously. That's what you do in times of crisis, you pray. And I didn't know what to do. And we had, was praying, and the Lord said, read 1 Corinthians 13. And I was like, well, I know what 1 Corinthians 13 says, And it was very apparent that I did not know what 1 Corinthians 13 said. And I went to 1 Corinthians 13, and immediately it was the very first line, and it was love is patient. And he said, if you are not that, you can't be anything else. Mm. And I remember going, oh my gosh, like, still it was like so ridiculously hard. Like, my God, you're just moving so fast, and you've made 1,000 other things more important than what you actually wanted to be important, because you thought if you made these things important, that this would eventually find its purpose. Like that this thing would eventually know that it's like Nikki and the family would know they're important, that their sacrifice was worth something because everything else was really important. When it was the exact opposite, that all of this other stuff was actually not important at all. All the meetings, all the ministry was not really important because this thing that you had at home was so precious. but it was being run over for one reason. Like, you weren't willing to play it really slow and make sure every moment, like, I guess what the Lord in that moment, I don't know if it was that moment, they all get kind of blended at this point, but it's like, at that moment you realize that presence is about being present, and that patience is about being present in the small little moments that seem insignificant. That this moment is the most important thing that you have right now, because you don't ever get this moment back again. But if you're super busy and super impatient, you miss all the little tiny moments that make up a lifetime. So that week, 5 days pretty much, Monday to Friday or whenever it was like I just couldn't eat or sleep. I just devoured 1 Corinthians 13. That's pretty much all I did, was I just sat up at night, the days, reading, meditating, whatever you want to call it, really just desperation, trying to figure out, okay, and then calling a counselor and lining up counseling appointments that like for the next 6 months or 7 months, like lining up counseling appointments, because I was like, I just need help, like, and getting a counselor. Outside of that, it was like just devouring 1 Corinthians 13 and me going, well, no wonder she's freaking hurt. I'm like, none of these things. There's not a thing on this list that I can say, well, that one I have covered. Like, well, that one I do well. It's like, no, I'm pretty much all of these. I'm not very nice because I'm super impatient. So I can't be kind because I'm actually impatient. Well, love isn't rude, but I'm actually pretty rude because I'm not very kind because I'm really impatient and I'm actually doing 1,000 other things. I don't really have time to be nice because I'm really got other stuff to do. So if I've got all these other things to do, I can't really be nice because I don't have time for that, because nice takes time, and time is something I don't have because I'm really, really busy with 1,000 other things. And I just looked through this list and I was like, I am none of these things. I have none of this. No wonder my wife doesn't feel loved. It's not about our childhood. It's not about any of those. Yeah, these are all involved and these are all part of it. But in reality, I'm none of these things that the Bible clearly says makes up love. I'm not any of them.
Well, I think I spent that week realizing, like, wow, he's really, because up until this point, we would have those 3-month duels. And it would be like, okay, yeah, well, I'm going to do A, B, or C or whatever. And I'd feel like, wow, I think we made some progress in our marriage. Like, this is really cool. And like maybe 2 or 3 days later, I feel like we were right back where we started. And, all right, well, we'll just walk this road for 6 months till we have another little duel. So I was kind of expecting that that's what was going to happen again. And maybe I'd get 3 days this time because this was a bigger blow. But then we'll just be right back, whatever. And I'd never really seen him that hurt. It was something about it felt different. It was like, wow, I think he's really processing this at a deeper level than he ever had. And intellectually, that's interesting. But emotionally, quite frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. I really didn't. And I kind of thought, wow, almost like seeing myself like out here looking at myself going, you're not generally a cold-hearted person. So this is an interesting way that you're operating here, because you're really hurting him by I wasn't being cold, but I was being very indifferent because I was indifferent. And I didn't even know where that switch was inside of me to flick it back over to go, okay, let's care. Let's go back there. Do you remember that hurt place, that really painful, like I'm gonna die place? Let's go back there because maybe, just maybe, he's changed. And maybe, just maybe, this might be different this time. And so 4 or 5 days later, I went out to dinner with a girlfriend of mine and I was telling her kind of where we were at and what was going on. And I said, like, honestly, like, would you just pray for me? Because only God will change my heart. I don't even know where the switch is to go back to caring. I came home from dinner that night and sat across the table from him and sort of said, so what are we going to talk about? This is getting awkward walking around, because I'd almost rather you just accepted the fact that I'm done and let's just play Barbie and Ken and not try to act like you're all hurt and you're going to change. Like this, this has been 5 days. I'm over it. Yeah. Let's go back to Barbie and Ken or whatever we're going to be. And he said he was sorry. And he listed all the reasons he was sorry. And even more than that, he said, I've hurt you in these ways. And I can see now why that's hurt you. Because of this, and that. And I realize now that I actually don't even know you. And in a moment, the switch was back over. Because in that moment, I feel like, oh my, he touched that. There's this like longing in your heart that you have that someone will care about that person so deep inside of you. And in that moment, I knew he really cared. Like, he really cared about who I was. And I really believed that he wanted to know what my dreams were, and that he really was, like, it wasn't a joke this time. Like, I mattered. Like, me as a person, not what I added to his ministry or what I represented as a good Christian wife. Like, me as a person, outside of anything I had to offer him, I mattered to him.
It was just like as if the presence of God just came into the room in such a very tangible way. I think we cried and hugged for hours and hours. And I was like, I was just so great. Like, I don't know if then, so you have this 5 days earlier, the greatest hurt. Like, you're like disappointed and hurt, like, cause you're like, I don't know what to do. And then 5 days later, this like the resurrection of Jesus is what it felt like, where it's like, it's like this thing you thought could never be possible. And then it's possible, you know? And that was like what was so insane about it.
So we had this week that turned into a month, turned into a few months of really taking some very intentional time to get to like know each other on a deep level, like just sitting in a room, no more TV, and we just poured out our guts to one another in a lot of ways.
No more distractions.
And yeah, like being very present and feeling him be present for the first time really ever. Like, he was there. He was actually there with me and there with our kids, and it just felt very present. And I had to, and really through the grace of God, I was able to, in small measures, begin to build a little bit of trust that I could be vulnerable with my emotions with him, and it was safe.
As this was going on, we had talked to a few people. Obviously, I was calling people that I knew and a couple moms and dads. And then in the midst of that, we ran into somebody who they were supposed to go to this big meeting with a bunch of important people. The night before, his wife had a dream, a significant dream. And in the dream, it was all these really important ministry people around a table having a very important meeting. And in the middle of the meeting, there was this woman dancing on a stripper pole, and she's watching this as the wife. And they're throwing money at her and putting money in her what she was wearing, like her bathing suit or whatever. And the Lord appears to her in the dream and says, "Do you know who she is?" And in her mind, I mean, I think most people, like, you know, in sort of the prophetic world, in this sort of whatever culture, it's like, she was like, "Oh, it's Jezebel, it's the spirit of lust, it's this stuff." And the Lord looks at her in the dream, this is the Jake Hamilton version, in the dream, and says, "No, that's ministry." And she's convincing them that they have intimacy and they have depth, and they're pouring out their hearts to her and their money to her, but they're leaving her but she is leaving them empty and wanting more. And she woke up in the dream, told him this, and he shares the dream at a very important meeting and all these things. And for me, she shared that dream. The husband shared the dream. And it was, for me, what I remember the Lord saying is, you have to divorce ministry. Like, for me, that was super important. Like, I had actually married ministry. Like, in my heart, I had covenanted to this thing as if it was God. And I was actually cheating on this thing with my wife. So this thing was getting my time and my attention and my focus. And if I didn't divorce it, like break covenant with it, like Nikki was not going to get my full heart. And so in my heart, that was super significant. Like I had to it was like deliverance for me. Going, this thing, I break the covenant that I've made with this thing. I had realized I had built this whole other person that was married to this thing that I had to actually get rid of and push as not divorce my calling and my what God had done, the gifts and talents and abilities that God had given me, but it was different than marrying this thing and covenanting to this thing and making it the center of your world. Because what was the center is obviously first God, but ministry is not God, and I had to divorce that reality so that I could give my heart literally to God. Separate from that, give my heart to the Lord so that Nikki got the fullest, my family got the fullest and best part of me, not everybody else.
What's really shifted in our lives is now the center of our lives isn't based around ministry and what we're going to do next and what God's calling us to do in the church and with the body of Christ. What God's calling us to do is with each other. The reality of the idea that we actually could become one. Like, not just best friends, not just husband and wife, but that we could become of one flesh became a real, tangible thing to me.
That's good.
That I actually completely believe is possible. And I feel like every day there's a knitting of our flesh together in a deeper way than I really ever hoped for. Like, it wasn't even something I thought was possible or something I even desired. But now I believe it, and I see it, and I feel it, and I'm experiencing it.
The beauty of trying to figure that out with one another with intentionality, not like, okay, well, we'll figure that out later at our next thing. And well, okay, we'll get to that later. Like, no, in every circumstance, taking the time to kind of like navigate it together. Honestly, it's made it a lot more fun.
And I think we've gotten from, we had to start at a clean slate. Like, I really had to realize, like, okay, if this is gonna work, I have to let the past be the past and let the present be. And I have to take that risk in my heart that says, I might get hurt, but I have to take the risk because the marriage and my love for you is worth it. Like, you're worth it, and I'm gonna trust you. And that's not an easy thing to do, and it's a process, and I'm not saying I've arrived there, but there is a part of going, like, I am gonna put myself out on the limb again and trust that you're not gonna hurt me. And along with that, now instead of every 6 months having a major blowout or going like, hey, we need to have like a marriage talk. Like, where are we? I feel like that's like a every 15-minute focus. Like, this is number one focus. Every 10 minutes, like, are we still okay? Like, not in a way that's like, oh, I'm super insecure. Are you okay with me? Am I okay with you? But in a way of, this is top priority. It's the most important thing we have, is making sure that this connection is here and we're still on point with one another.
The center of everything we're doing right now, and the reason we're doing any of this stuff that we're doing now, and the reason that, and what happened to us is what Nikki said, like, we're trying to learn how to become one flesh. And we believe that what God has joined together, no man can tear apart. And the reality is that God joined us together, not man. We didn't get married when we decided to sign some paperwork that the government agreed that we're married. When we said yes to each other, something in the spirit happened that was a covenant that goes into eternity and affects the entire planet forever. Like, it affects generational lines. It affects families of families of families of families. And all we're trying to do in the midst of this thing, every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes, over the course of our life right now, we're trying to figure out, what does it actually look like to become one flesh? It's not a side note. It's not a nice Bible topic. It's not a book title. It's not the title of anything. It's what we're actually trying to do. And that's what we're trying to navigate, is how do we become one flesh?
And I think before, maybe we would say, oh yeah, we want to work on our marriage, because you kind of have to have a solid marriage to accomplish this other goal over here. Where now this is the goal. Like, this is it. Like, everything else comes second to this as a goal.
Yeah, and it's that going from here to here is the world. That's the difference. It has to go from, that is a great idea, we should really do that, to like now it's literally what Nikki said. It's become this is the goal. Like there's not, everything else is really secondary. If none of that happens, that's actually okay. It's great. How is this doing? We're good? Oh, awesome. We could live in a cardboard box, and as long as if this is good, everything else works because we have this. You can't take this away because what God has joined together, no one can take away. Like God actually did it, not us. Like in the living room when everything shifted, and when in the hotel room with Chris, when all this stuff happened, it was God, not man. It was God, and now we're just trying to navigate how we live this out for 50, 60, 70 years, not 10 minutes. We want to live this out for the rest of our lives and really let other people know it's possible too. So I feel like that's the goal.
Even if it all falls apart, your love is the best part, love is the best part. Your love is the best part.